for a pledge of allegiance?
Can we wait for Larry or not
He won't be here.
at all?
I don't believe so, no. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. When did he notify that he wasn't going to be around?
What's that?
When did he notify you that he wasn't going to be able
I'd
to
have
make
to
it?
go look, I'm not sure, but he's not going to be here.
Why not reschedule these things for where people can actually meet it? I mean, I came back from New Jersey just to...
Thank you.
I understand that, but I mean, why don't we make it that it's easy on the people that are running the meeting, which is the board of directors and
Okay.
these committees?
There was no request to change it, so I
All
didn't.
right, hey Rita, can we make a recommendation to the board that we move these meetings to 7 p.m. so that stakeholders and board members can actually attend these meetings? Is that a yes?
No, it's
It's a yes or no?
it's a no answer.
It's a no answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Melissa, I recommend to the board that we move these meetings to 7 p.m. so that stakeholders and, as the policy committee, since there's only 2 of us, I recommend it. And half is better than 0, since she's a 0 vote, that doesn't count. So, to move them to 7 p.m. so that the stakeholders and the board members can make it. Thank you for not voting, Rita.
I take a page from your playbook on the
Yep,
budget
and
date.
you abstained. Perfect. Good move. Thank you.
I thought she abstained, I think she said no.
I think I said no, yeah.
No, you said you didn't want to
I
answer.
said I have no answer.
You're right. That no answer is a non-vote. Non-answer. Yeah. If you want to change it now?
No.
Okay, just checking. No problem. Mr. Claver, that was a non-vote, which is counted
Thanks for
as
your clarification.
non. Yeah, and you understand the Robert's Rules of Order relationship to non-votes, sir?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you go through the list here, we have the minutes from May 1st. That was there. Going through the first attachment is the new law. That's what's highlighted in the attachment. You'll see there in yellow. That relates to policy 201 and 208 for the recommended changes in those. So you can see that's highlighted, the compulsory school age change and the requirement also for kindergarten age has changed as well. So these you can see was amended in June 28, 2019. So the 2 policies, policy 201 and 208 that we'll discuss is based upon the new, is recommended based upon that law. But I wanted to include that.
And what's the new law's age? 20 something, right?
What is it?
What's the new age?
6 and 18.
Yeah, it's this attachment right here.
It's right here.
This is an attachment. That's in that yellow. What's highlighted, it has the part that's... It's just, yeah, it's just a single. It's just a single sheet.
Was it included with the email?
Yes.
It's the very first page after the peach, I guess it would be.
That's everything.
It's highlighted in a yellow. Policy 150, Tim's here as the Title I coordinator, so we're just going to go through those policies. Most of them are for review, but there is some changes we'll talk about as we move down. But policy 150 is just a policy that we have to review every year as part of the Title I compliance. And you can see there that it goes through and talks about, what is required, the grade span that is, part of this. So this is for the services that we offer, and this is from February 26th of 2018.
And that's one change we'll be making now, it's K through 5 instead of the 4.
And that's on the definition.
That's the only definition, that's the only change for comparability.
I have it down for change.
So it's title services, do all the service, K to 5. Policy 201 under pupils. Again, if you look, you'll see there is portions that are marked out, and then in green is the revision. Again, that comes based upon that law that the change in the law that we talked about. You can see it used to be 8 years old, and now they have moved the requirement for kindergartners down to the age of 6. For that, and then also anything as far as admission eligibility had to be stricken as well. So you can see that the only change we have is under guidelines, first beginners, and it's listed there for that policy. So those are the recommended changes based upon that new law that has been passed. For our district, we do take, there is an option for students before October 15th, and that is if the students, pass a skills test. And they do have an option for early entry. So there's a little bit of a window that students do have access to coming in kindergarten early if they're tested and eligible. Policy 208 is regarding withdrawal school. Again, this is just talking about compulsory school age. There's different guidelines with when a student can withdraw from school. There's different guidelines when a student can withdraw from school by the law based upon having a full-time job, the age, and of course, parents' approval as well. The age of 17, age of 18. They do not, at this point, need parents' approval to withdraw from school. Of course, when students withdraw, there's a process that we go through to try and encourage them not to withdraw. We offer them alternatives. There's alternatives offered at CCTI as well, and GED courses we do offer at CCTI as well as our district. If anyone has looked at the GED course, it's definitely more rigorous. It's a difficult course. The math is much more advanced to the point of, not general math. It's a lot of algebra and geometry as well. The GED course. Anti-bullying is a policy that we have to review every year. You can see we did review it in January of this year, but we're also, looking at it again. This is a policy that is a lot of times reviewed by the state. When they come in to review us, they'll look at our anti-bullying policy to see when it was last reviewed. We're not making any recommendations for any changes at this, but by law, we're supposed to include it and give people an opportunity to review it as well.
Who's not making any recommendations to change it?
I'm not making any recommendations.
The administration.
Yes, correct.
But this is a policy committee meeting by the members of the board.
Yes.
So you're...
And this was written by you, or was this taken from?
This was last reviewed January 9th, 2000.
No, but I mean, the initial policy, was it written, did it come from like PSBA?
That was part of it, yeah, but there's been adjustments as we made on our own to
Okay.
around it as well. And it always,
That's all I was getting at, where,
there's been changes to cyberbullying.
yeah, I see that come up all the time.
It's
Those things
listed.
that, yeah.
Yep. So it talks about that cyberbullying was one of the major changes that was, made the last time it was reviewed to include that as part of it. And that is probably something that we deal with, unfortunately, often. A lot of times it's stuff that's out of school that is brought into the school, but we still have to address it when it comes to us. In addition, we also have the Attorney General's office comes in and does a presentation. We talk to our, kids at all levels about cyberbullying and different things with social media as well. And so we have seminars throughout the year in relation to bullying.
So this talks about the intervention, the guidelines, the investigative procedures, and the consequences. How does a student make a complaint?
They would go to the guidance office, probably at that point, or the high school or middle school or elementary office to go in.
That's not in our policy.
No.
So can we add to our policy, or actually, I know we can. I would like us to add to our policy that the complaints are written in a form to the superintendent, and then secondly, I want the superintendent to send a report of the number of forms they received on a monthly basis at the board meeting. So we should add that. I make a recommendation to the board that we add language to give the policy a form for students making complaints, or anyone making a complaint, and that those complaints be numbered and recorded by the superintendent with a tally given at the end, or at the each board meeting.
There is on page 3, there's already some guidelines for student, parent, guardian, employee reporting.
Well, there's no
we have-
form. We have forms,
right.
individual forms.
Shall contact the building principal. He said guidance counselor, it says principal, so I know that the policy is not being administered properly. We should administer it
It says
properly.
to their teachers, building principals, or other school employees, so guidance counselors are
School
considered.
employee.
I agree. Semantics. The reality is when I asked, he gave one answer. This is a different answer. We got to make sure it's being done properly. We want to make sure it's recorded properly. There's confidentiality concerns. We want it to go to the superintendent, but we want him to have to report it in a public meeting that 5 bullying instances were reported. And then the parents themselves can say, wait a second, 5? I know of 3 and I did 1. So who's the other one? Or more likely 0 were done. And they said, wait a second, I made a complaint. How come that one's not here? So there's some accountability to the government and some transparency to the government by just announcing the number that were received in a given month for the people, and that way that the process can be more documented, so that we don't have someone say, go to your guidance counselor, when the real answer should be, go to your building principal, report it, to these other entities,
other
teachers,
school
right,
employees,
what it
other
says
school
inside the
employees,
policy.
Right, other school employees too, says there.
No, we should only have, it should go to one location.
Well,
They
that's.
should file a
But
complaint.
If that person's not there, I don't think you want to wait, I think you should get this
You can
alternate.
tell anybody, but they should file a complaint. They should have a process to which to file a complaint. You're a salaried employee, you have to be there, you have to be available. If someone walks up to a teacher and says, hey, I'm being bullied, that teacher should be instructed to instantly get the superintendent involved, file the complaint, so that we can record what's taken place and have an answer. Because we want to know how this is happening inside of our district, so we can prevent it and or alleviate it.
So with our policy 248, we have a harassment form that we created 2 times ago, maybe, when we had a policy meeting.
Yeah, but then it's talking about for students to fill out.
That's what I mean, that's for
Students or parents, a
Report
parent can
forms for
report it.
complaints of unlawful harassment. So we have that for students for unlawful harassment. You could just change unlawful harassment, I would assume, to bullying, cyberbullying. And on that attachment is alleged harassment was based on race, gender, religion, color, age, sexual orientation, national origin, disability.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is talk to the building principals and see.
Well, that's,
you know,
my
I mean,
concern is that they have someone to go to in each building, not come over here to you.
Well, they go to
Yeah.
anybody, but ultimately, the process that
Right,
we're
he gets
responsible
them at
for
the end.
is make sure that those
Yeah.
principals and people are dictated to make sure that they tell the superintendent, so they don't
you ever let
handle it
anybody
in-house,
finish?
right?
Don't you ever let anybody finish?
No. I'll answer.
I was not done speaking, and thank you. I was going to say something very similar, but if you could just learn to wait until someone stops before you start, it would be a whole lot easier on the rest of us.
I'm not here to make your life easier, Rita. I'm here to get a job done. But I can appreciate your advice, and I thank you for it. Now,
So
the reality is,
I believe
I was
that,
speaking now, okay, you do your thing, sorry.
don't you call me
You do your
honey
thing.
ever
Do your thing.
again.
Do your thing. Do your thing, Rita.
I feel they should go through the process that they already have, whatever that is, JJ, with a form. I have no problem filling out a form that comes to you. But I don't feel that people have to come to you with the bullying complaint. If it can be handled by the building principal, by the guidance counselor, by the nurse, whatever the situation is, and they're responsible to fill out a form and ask the parent to fill out, if the parent chooses to. If the parent doesn't want to, I don't know that we can force them, can we?
Any information we take too, maybe could be a phone.
Yeah.
So, be a report, that's
There may
fine.
not be a report, yeah. But anyway, I have no problem with them coming to you and you saying how the number was, but I don't know that we need to change the process to involve you in every bullying incident personally, and that's my concern.
He has to be involved. My suggestion is that he has to be involved in the fact that he has to know that it occurred, because then we want to track it and get a report back.
That's what I just said. That's what we talked about, yeah.
I agree, but that's not what you just said.
No, all right.
Okay. But what you said is he shouldn't be involved, and I'm saying he should, in the form that he gets a form,
That's
that
what
it
I
occurred.
said. He should not be involved personally in each attempt, but he should get the report and report to us the number. That's exactly what I said, Dave. I'm
Perfect.
done arguing this with you.
I would agree. So we're in agreement. We recommend that the board adopts a form, that the board adopts the reporting of any incident to the superintendent,
I'm concerned.
even if it's not a form,
Yeah.
that it gets done, and then it gets reported to the board on
What is
a monthly
that?
basis.
You mean coming to you?
Yeah, I mean, because it could be addressed at the building.
Well, I want it addressed
Most
at
of
the
them
building.
are
Yeah.
addressed at the building.
And I think all you're getting at is you want to know how many that is, right?
Yeah, you want to track it.
So, yes, if they just tell you, I had 6 this month, or I had 3 this month, and you report that to the board. But that's what I mean, I don't think the process should change as to who these kids are going to, especially on the elementary level. They're not gonna come up here and give their story to JJ.
They don't have to read it. We already discussed that.
Yeah.
You discussed that they have to give the story to someone, and whomever they give it to
Has to.
has a responsibility to tell the superintendent. And at that point, the superintendent is supposed to log those number, so he can provide that to the board in a transparent meeting, so that the parents know how many took place, and the parents know whether or not
Whatever
it's being,
process we have, be what he's.
not whatever process we have.
Yeah.
What do you mean, whatever process we have? The
I mean,
board
if you're
dictates the
looking
process.
for- If you're looking for a number of bullying reports monthly, that's no problem.
Yeah,
No,
and
we're
that's-
looking, no. The reporting is just the accountability of it. That's part of it. The goal is to prevent bullying.
Well,
The
of
goal
course
is to
it
give
is.
access, hold on. The goal is to make bullying important enough, to make sure that it's reported, it's understood, and that something will take place, and that it's at the board level. And to be able to get that effective change for these students, you're looking at a couple things that need to take place. One is that the parents can report it on a piece of paper so that it's documented. Number 2, you want to be able to have a student be able to report it to whomever is at arm's reach. I agree. They should be able to tell anybody that they feel confident enough to say something's going on, that something's going on. And then that person should be obligated to give that information to the superintendent, because he has the training, he has the understanding, and he has the knowledge and experience to make sure that if it's a janitor that they gave the information to, that it's been handled properly. He's the one that has to be the point man to make sure it goes through the process. Whether he decides to get a counselor involved, or maybe talk to the teachers, or follow this procedure, it's their responsibility. But we want that administration being involved in bullying so we can prevent it. Not necessarily just deal with it after it happens. We want to deal with it before it happens. We want to take a proactive stance.
So how
And
does
that's how you
filing
do
a
it.
report do that? How does filing a report prevent it from happening?
Okay. I'll have to give you a managerial class someday, but not right now. You cannot make an effective change to things you do not measure. So, by making a report, you can now measure them. Once they're measured, you can make adjustments to see if the measurement of those items have been moving in the direction that you seek. And then once the direction has moved into the direction that you seek, you can recognize that the decisions you made are beneficial. If the process moves in a decision opposite of what you speak, you can try again. And managerially, you can adjust things to obtain the goal that you are aiming for. So without the measurement of it, it's chaos. There's no value to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, policy 906.1. Tim, I have the Title I parent complaints that we have, and the changes that are recommended are just named. You can see that this was, again, review, but there are several areas to adjust.
Right, we have, when it comes down to, excuse me, they talk about with No Child Left Behind, Nickleby, the complaint, that will be changed entirely because that's going to be following the ESSA, which replaced No Child Left Behind.
And that's the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Right. The levels are all the same, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and final level. But you'll see there, like I said, the only thing that will be changing is where it says about No Child Left Behind complaint procedure. That'll be following the ESSA. And just with some name changes, instead of referred to curriculum coordinator, would be the assistant student superintendent, who would be me, that would then follow going through to Mr. Cleaver. And you'll see there that there's also the form that they would fill out and send in to us. And again, that would be in particular just to the elementary center K through 5, because that is our Title I program school-wide.
Policy,
Hold on. Rita, do you want to go first on this one, or? You sure? Okay. Do you mind if I have the floor to? Okay. So first of all, this is a policy, 906.1. It has a significant amount of ambiguity within the policy. Ambiguity is a
I know.
fault. I'm sorry, were you going to cut me off first? Okay, thank you. Ambiguity is a fault of the board that provides latitude to an administration where it is not warranted. Ambiguity, not control, should be removed from the system, and the control should be allowed to be with the administration. Therefore, under delegation of responsibility, we should once again track these things by having the superintendent tell us how many complaints he has on a monthly basis for the same reasons as previously described. But more importantly, the ambiguity of the third sentence, it looks like, in the delegation of responsibility. If further action is warranted based on the initial investigation, such actions shall be in accordance with established guidelines. These should be well defined. They should not be ambiguous, and they should be provided within this policy. They should know what action is warranted and based on which initial investigation. Because otherwise, we have a system where our administration that we delegated our authority to has the ability to alleviate the complaint without the board ever knowing or being able to adjust it. And that is a mistake. I don't think we should delegate our authority to the superintendent without some specific guidelines as to defining further action is warranted based on initial investigation and in accordance with established guidelines. So where are those guidelines currently published, Mr. Cleaver?
it would be in our Title I. We have a handbook as well for Title I, so it'd be all related to the Title I.
They should be moved into this policy because the policy does not have those referenced on the top part of the policy where it says legal. They should be referenced and then denoted, highlighted, as every other policy in our school handbook. And secondly, the form for the Title I complaint that goes to the superintendent should be CC'd to the board secretary as well. So that there's checks and balances within the system. I would like to make a recommendation that we make those changes to this policy prior to putting this in front of the board.
Is it possible to just, instead of writing the whole handbook in here, accordance with established guidelines in the Title I handbook?
No, you have to, this policy is a subset of law. This is your school law. You're a judge of this school law when it comes down to it. It should be within the policy so that everybody knows what you're judging them to, and that's the moral side of this puzzle. This is the law.
Got it?
The only thing is to make any change, we'd have to make sure it's within federal guidelines.
Correct, oh yeah, you gotta make sure you're gonna follow the law. You don't want the ambiguity to exist that puts the district at a risk. You've gotta clean these things up. The PSBA does not do their job.
So we
They
could
leave
bring
the
this-
ambiguity.
We could bring this back at the next policy meeting.
No, we just add it, there's nothing, we're not adding anything to the policy other than clarity. We're not changing anything in the policy other than clarity.
I'd just like to make sure that what we're doing is in accordance.
We'll follow, it'll be, instead of the No Child Left Behind complaint procedure, it will be the SS, which is the federal guidelines, which is what we have to follow.
Right, and the part that you have all this delegation of responsibility, you have to delegate the responsibility with the authority to which they have to maintain that standard, so that we can hold them accountable, and we can be held accountable as a government. That's the law. That's what we're here to do.
Thank you.
So there's no reason to kick this down the road for 6 more months, is what you're talking about, when you just add to the clarity of this policy and remove the ambiguity of the policy. And I'm adding clarity I'm adding some checks and balances in the system by adding a copy to the board secretary. Who is our board secretary currently?
Patty.
Patty? I know it used to be Brian, I wasn't sure if that changed, it was streamlined. I would like to make that change to someone else as well. I think our board secretary should be someone like Melissa or Missy or someone that the board can hold accountable.
Administrative board secretary is Patty.
I'm sorry?
The board secretary is Patty at this point.
I know, at this point, correct, at this
That'd have to
point.
be something.
The board should change. I'm making the recommendation that we find that since these things will be going to the board secretary, the secretary should be held accountable. We need someone that we can hold accountable, so we should pick someone that is
And I would
accountable.
get no on that. Patty should be the board secretary.
Okay, 1-to-1, sounds good. Which one carries?
Thank you.
Which one carries, yours or mine? It's 50-50.
All we do is make a recommendation.
I
You
understand,
make
so I'll
yours,
still make the
make mine.
recommendation. It was a recommendation by the policy committee of 50-50.
No.
Yes, it was.
Can't do that.
Why not? Why does your vote of no supersede my vote of yes? If there's only 2 people. I'm sorry?
You can make your argument at the board meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't need to make an argument at the board meeting. I'm just telling you that you say by recommendation of half the policy committee, this was the recommendation. And the people recommending was Mr. Bradley, the people that not recommending to add accountability to that process was Rita Spinelli. And then just do it. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're more than welcome to do that. But make sure it gets added onto the
It
board.
will not be on the board.
It does. Why would you?
Because it's not a recommendation from the majority of the committee.
It's 50-50. That's not an unrecommendation, Mr. Cleaver.
That's
It's
not a majority.
It's not an unmajority
It's
either.
a draw.
So let's try it this way. I don't want to change it. Now, do you want to have a vote?
So-
It's the same thing, sir. No, you make it's a farcical
You can
argument.
make your argument.
I'm not making an argument. I'm telling you what to do as a board, as a committee,
No.
and you're not allowed to boycott
You
that.
don't get to tell him what to do.
You actually do, Rita. We are the policy
You
committee.
do not.
We're the policy committee.
You do not.
I understand that, but we are the policy committee. He works for the board. The policy committee is to discuss things and then take them to the board as a whole
The
to vote.
majority of the
When-
So
policy.
your only recommendation is that you're not voting here.
We
It's only a
don't.
recommendation whether you do or don't.
I know.
The recording of the minutes,
And the majority of the
And record-
committee is
No,
not making
sir.
a recommendation.
No, sir.
That's how it works.
no, not at all, sir. The policy committee sends things to the board. And right now, what we are sending to the board is a suggestion, a recommendation to change the board secretary to someone we can hold accountable. You chose to say, I don't want to recommend that. I chose that I do. It's a split. Larry's not here. Tie. But it still gets done. Now the fact, yes it does.
No,
You
it
do not
doesn't.
have the right to boycott that on the agenda, sir.
The recommendation.
You do not have the right to boycott that on the
There's no
agenda.
recommendation.
Under
from the
what
majority of the
authority,
committee.
under what authority of law are you going to use to stop this from becoming on the
You can bring it
agenda?
up at the board meeting. It is
No.
not a recommendation from this committee.
It is a recommendation. I recommended it.
But you're not the committee.
I didn't say I was. I'm half of the committee. You're half of the committee. Your non-recommendation has no more support. Your non-recommendation has no less or no more support than my recommendation. Rita, this is a block. You do not have the authority or the power.
That's your opinion.
Not my opinion. Show me the law that shows you can do that, Mr.
Show me the
Cleaver.
law that.
I just did. Robert's Rules of Order says, very simply, that we're governed by, that if two people have a tie, the recommendation goes to the board with the stance of who we're the recommending and who we're not recommending.
I'd have to look.
Then look it up. But you don't tell me you can't do it, sir. And don't tell me you're going to boycott a direct order from the
At
board.
this point, I'm not putting that recommendation on.
You're taking it upon yourself to decide without even looking it up?
Because at this point, it's not the majority.
Why does she have more authority than I do over this meeting if there's two of us, sir?
It's not that that's a.
That's a bad argument.
Majority of the committee.
You do not have the,
You could bring it up.
there's only two.
You could bring it up.
There's only two, sir. What gives you the authority to block the policy committee from putting a recommendation onto the agenda
Because
for
the
the
majority
board?
of the policy committee is not making that recommendation.
Say that one more time?
Because the majority of the.
There's only
policy-
two of us, sir.
Correct.
Right,
So
so
the majority
But the
would have to
policy
be more
committee
than.
includes Larry.
there's no votes in a policy committee, sir.
No, I know that, but there's.
So
no-
I made the recommendation. There's nothing that stops that recommendation, right? The only thing that would stop a recommendation if they had more than a majority to prevent it. You need a more than a majority to prevent it, sir.
No, I think it's a majority.
You're wrong.
Okay, thank you.
So, but again, it goes on the agenda. It goes on to the board minutes. Without the majority to block it,
Thank you,
it has to move forward. So are you going to decide to move it forward, or are you going to stay your stance?
thank you.
Which one are you going to do,
So
sir?
now what happens if I tell him I
What-
don't want it on the agenda?
You put that on the agenda. I say vote no. You say vote yes. And he's going to say we have two recommendations. One is to not put it on the agenda. It was voted on by half the board and the other half. And the other one is to not, and it was voted on by these two halves. And that's the policy, and that's how it works. That's Robert's Rules of Order. That's how you process it. That's his responsibility to do it. And if he's going to boycott that without the authority,
I don't get it, but again,
Without the authority-
Robert's Rules of Order.
he has no authority to do that, Rita. Who sets the agenda?
Thank you.
Who sets the agenda, Rita? Do you or does he?
You can make your argument at the board.
There's no argument, sir. You're doing your job. That's your job. To fail to do that job
Sure,
should have some repercussions.
thank you. Okay, policy 918, again, this is the review for family engagement. There's a couple of changes with this one. The only one we have is we're adding CDTs to part of the testing procedure for benchmarks for grades 3 through 8, or 3 through 5.
3 through 5.
3 through 5. We used to use the STAR benchmark across the board, but now we're going with CDTs for the benchmark testing for our students. So that would just have to be added into here, and Tim, I'm looking for the spot as well.
That's the spot where that would be when you go all the way to the last, which comes under Title I School Parent Involvement Policy, Guidelines for School Parent Involvement, number 2. Well, actually, the last bullet right above number 2. Notification of students being tested in the beginning of the school year who fall below levels of STAR Renaissance, CDTs, and PSSA assessments. That would be it's the 5th page back.
Second from the last page.
Yep. And it's the last bullet under number 1. So it would be listed there. And then it would also be the last bullet in number 6. And the CDT, what that stands for is Classroom Diagnostic Testing, and then that transfers over to Classroom Diagnostic Tools, which is all related to the SAS portal, Student Assistance, where teachers can go in, differentiated instruction is set up for the kids, resources are available, and plans and so forth to meet their needs. It also helps them to quantify the students based upon like what standards and anchors they're weak in or strong, so they can group their kids again for the differentiated instruction. And all that information, like it says there, explanation of reason, support, everything else, that we adjusted last year, and all that goes home with the students to the parents. And then we have our Title IX, I think it's October, it's usually the first or second Wednesday of October. And then everything's explained to the parents at that evening as well.
Anything?
Well, wait, are we going to do this one or not? We're going to review this
Okay,
one?
another-
Rita, do you want to go first?
The only thing you're changing is the CDTs,
Yes.
correct?
A form of assessment.
But we're board members, so we have responsibilities. So inside this policy,
Did you?
I did. And when it says that the superintendent or designee shall ensure that the district Title I program, right, comply with the requirements of federal law, and the superintendent or designee shall ensure that the district and its school, right? How do we ensure that he did his job? How have you've had all this experience, how have you ensured that he, after this board delegated its responsibility, abdicated it actually, to the superintendent or some unnamed designee, how do you ensure that this took place?
How do you ensure? How would you ensure?
Documentation, transparency, and accountability.
We get a board, we get a report
You do
from
not.
Title,
Every month
every month. Gloria
Or
gets
so,
a
you
title
say?
report.
Every month there's a title.
Every month, there's a title report.
Go
Gloria
ahead.
gets it.
And what's the title report involved?
Information regarding the program, number of students that are involved every month, involves
Right? Keep going.
information for the title program.
And according to this, there's a federal law that goes along with this, right?
Title I is federal, yes.
Sorry?
Title I is federal.
Yeah, federal law that goes along with it. How do you ensure to us that we're in compliance with that law? From a statement?
We get audited.
I understand that. But how do you ensure to
I
us?
just answered, we get audited.
When?
Every 3 years, I believe, is the audit.
So they check the gate
Plus
after the
every-
horses are gone, right?
Plus every
Our-
year, part of the audit is also federal programs.
Correct. So my point is that our policy is lax in the fact that we as a board have not given the documentation and accountability to the superintendent along with his responsibility to ensure that he does his job. Because if we're going to wait for a year, 2 or 3 to be audited, we should be doing this regular auditing as volunteer elected officials to ensure that he's doing his job. So since you don't know these federal laws, nor do I, we should have him complete a report that shows that they meet this responsibility. So we need to be educated as to what those laws are, and then we need to make sure that his report complies with that. so that we can ensure what we told him to ensure. Because without that, you have no checks and balances in the system, and you're just rubber stamping whatever you told him to ensure that he does. And then you're just believing. No verification, just trust. Correct?
I'm not having this conversation with you.
What conversation?
Whatever it is you want me to say.
I don't have anything I want you to say.
Here's
David.
how I feel, and I'm going to tell you this right now.
Sure.
You continue to refer to our superintendent as the subordinate. He is not subordinate to anyone. He is equal to everyone on the board. He can't vote, but he is an equal member. The same way a doctor is not subordinate to a hospital board. The doctor is in charge of his medical practice and the way he does things. If the board tells him to do something wrong, he does not have to listen. And that's what Mr. Cleaver is. He is not a subordinate to this board. He is part of it. He is the one we hired as the CEO to ensure that things are going the way they're supposed to. You don't know the laws on title. I don't know the laws on title. He knows the laws on title. Mr. Tech knows the laws on title. So listening to them instead of listening to you, to me, does not mean rubber stamping. To me, that's a wise choice. And that's all I have to say about that. I will continue to listen to their recommendations until you can prove to me that you know what you're talking about, and you haven't done that yet, not even once. You have big, grandiose rants and raves and carry-ons about everything that I can't verify, that nobody can verify. You take things out of context. You take things and turn them upside down. Why would I listen to you telling me that he's doing something wrong when he's the one that's been running this operation?
You're done? You're ready for my reply? Thank you. The reason you should is because it's your job. So regardless of your ability to understand all the aspects of the Title I, you should be educated enough to know what it is. For instance, I'll give you a great example.
To you.
I'll give you a great example. The reality is, if you're going to delegate to him your responsibility, which it's yours, it is the district's responsibility, it's the board's responsibility to do
Of
this.
which he is a member.
One more time. It is the elected government's majority authority to make these decisions as to how they will comply with the Pennsylvania School Code and create their own local laws at the local level. And just as you would make sure that your subordinate, and he is a subordinate to the board, he's elected at the will of the board.
He is not.
I'm finishing, you had your turn. We can share, and we don't even have to argue, Rita, you can just look it up. But,
He is not a subordinate. I did look it up.
okay, and what did you find?
He's not a subordinate.
And how did you find that, from whom?
Because I looked to see what subordinate meant.
Okay, but where did you look at it? Where did you look at it? Just the dictionary, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. But did you ask him if he's our subordinate?
He's not.
Ask him.
He's not.
Ask him.
Do you want me to read subordinate to you?
Sure.
Do you want me to read what it says?
But I'd like you to ask him. Because he has to answer honestly and truthfully.
That doesn't mean he's a subordinate.
Go
He's
ahead.
an employee. He's not a subordinate. Subordinate, lower ranking, junior, lower, lesser, inferior, lowly, minor, supporting, second fiddle. He is not that.
Okay, so also the term subordinate would be the person that you delegate your work to. He is one of your subordinates. Yes. I apologize.
The
Look at,
dictionary says.
good for you. Now ask him if he's a subordinate and see what he
I'm
says.
not going, I don't
Under the
think he
law.
is. I don't care what he
Under
says.
the law, let's ask him.
I don't care what he says. I don't think he is.
I understand
think
that.
he's an equal partner.
Under definition of Pennsylvania School Code, he's subordinate to the board of directors.
He answers.
He has no-
the board.
wait a
He is not subordinate.
He has no
He is not
authority.
lesser, he is not lowly, he is not minor.
Yes, he is, and here's why. Ready? He has no authority to make any decisions that you don't allow him to make. He has no authority to write a law, hire someone. He has no authority to administer these policies under any other guidelines than the ones we set for him. That's it. He does not have the authority of a board member. And when you abdicate all of that authority, rubber stamp, and blindly trust him without doing your job as
Okay, we've heard
At
this
will.
before. You got something else to say? You
Yes,
got
I
some
do.
new material tonight, Dave, because we've heard this already.
I know, but you need to look this up, Rita. You have to educate yourself. I was. Mr. Cleaver, are you a subordinate to the board of directors?
I'm still waiting to hear your Title I definition you said you were going to give us.
I don't have one. So my question is, do you have a subordinate responsibility to the board of directors, sir?
That is a team of 10.
Mhm,
It's a team of 10, you believe?
mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So, yes or no?
Again, it's a team of 10.
Okay. Do you have any voting authority? Do you have any authority to hire someone? Do you have any authority to write a law?
No, we
You're
are
a
not.
subordinate. So let's go down this path for a second.
No. we're
Hold on, I'm gonna go down
not
to Title I
with
path.
you.
So
You
Title-
lead everybody down a garden path, but you know what, Dave? You can fool you can fool the fans, but not the players.
Good.
People who know what's going on don't listen to you and don't think you know what the heck you're talking about. So you might have your little group that thinks you're God's gift to education, but the rest of the world doesn't. And the more and more people I speak with, the more I hear that.
Excellent. But it only takes one person, Rita, to use the right decision, the moral decision, not the groupthink, but the right moral decision, to understand that even though you do not understand or know all the nuances of Title I, you can also go to your subordinates that have knowledge and experience. You can ask them what they need to know. You can then recognize as a manager, as a board of director, right? You can say, well, it sounds like we need to be monitoring this, at which point you can add a form, you can add a process, you can add transparency, you can add accountability to the system, and then you can hold them to it.
Well, my
The same
vote
way- let me
is
finish the
no
sentence.
on the committee recommending this. Again, bring it up at the board meeting and talk to the whole board, but the committee's not.
No, we're doing it here,
gonna
this is where you do it, but here's a perfect analogy. I'm trusting that you have a bank account at a bank, and therefore you deposit your money into it. You don't have to understand all the fractional lending, all the banking institutions, or everything else that you signed when you opened the account. You should, but you do not have to know that. However, you were given a copy of it that you get to look back on. If you find that something is wrong, you have something to refer to. You can verify what they did. You get a report, a bank statement every month. You can look at that bank statement and verify the transactions that you did versus what they think they did. So they are your subordinate. You handed them, you have an agreement. You give them their money and they give you a report. If you don't like the report, hold on, if you don't like the report, you get to go back to them or change banks. If you don't like the report that's coming from your superintendent, you can change the report. And if he chooses to be insubordinate and not do his job, you can change superintendents. But the reality is, your job is to understand that you don't have to know the banking, but you want a record of every deposit and every withdrawal and every fee. You want a transactional start date and a transactional end date. And you want that report to say dates, transactions, and amounts, balances. And if you find that they made a mistake, you can correct it. That's your job. You don't have to know or be a banking financier to create a report or to ask for a report or accept a report that they're going to have. I think we should ask for one, let them show it what it is, and then we, as a board, goes out and looks and sees whether or not we want to add things or not add things to the report,
And I
and then
don't
verify.
think so, so why don't you bring it up at the board meeting? Because
I'm bringing up a policy. Policy means we're supposed to bring up.
then we're
So
gonna be a draw again, Dave.
you have no open-mindedness at all?
Do you?
Yes. So tell me why you don't want to do any amount of
I will
reporting.
not tell you anything.
Tell me why you don't want to not delegate all of your information to a designee that isn't even identified, have the ambiguity, and then have him insure himself.
I know.
Why do you have him insure himself?
I'm not having this conversation with you.
Why not?
Because
You're on a policy.
I told you my opinion. My opinion is bring it up in front of the whole board and see what everybody else has to say. It doesn't matter if policy makes a recommendation or not, because all of policy isn't here.
Do you understand the term ad hominem argument? Do you know what that means?
Is there anything,
Yes, there's other things to deal with. You do not run this meeting. I asked her a question. Please do not interrupt.
No,
Miss,
he is
do you know what
running
the
this
ad
meeting.
hominem argument is?
I'm not engaging with you anymore.
I know, you have no
because
idea.
You know my opinion.
I understand it.
That's, yeah, as you do when you don't know what's going on. I understand. And we all know that means that's the first you're hearing about it.
No, I do understand that you don't know.
is there anything else related to policy?
Yes, I have 3. It's under the school's jurisdiction, the law of the district, the board of directors.
Don't look at me, Dave.
You're the board member. I am looking at you. You're the one running this meeting with us. You're on the policy committee, not him. You're on the policy committee, right? So our board can implement a drug screening process and policy for our staff members. It is my recommendation that we implement a drug screening policy within our district. Would you like to help me recommend that to the board?
I would like to run it past the teachers union and the support union, because I feel there will be some discussion about
Why would there be?
Who's paying for it?
What's that? The district.
What is the estimated amount for the proposal you're making?
No
You
idea.
always like to have amount.
Yeah, we'd like to know that. So when we do it at other places, it's about $100 an employee for a yearly test. If we're gonna go down that path, there's a variety of ways to do it, but it's about $100 a test.
it. Can we see it?
You can do it at $30 a test. You can actually have it offset by insurance, is what I found, that if you actually have an aggressive
And did you
drug
find
screen
this for
policy.
school districts or for businesses?
Businesses.
Okay,
So
see.
we're just a big business though, and we actually have government buying power. But here's the process. You can actually do a drug screen for under $30 within a district. Depends on exactly which way you want to do it. I recommend that we go to the higher one that's closer to $100. How it would be implemented within a district and how it would be paid for, I wouldn't mind if our district paid for it. However, I have found that the insurance company, when you have an active drug screen program, will remove that cost because it's to their advantage. When we look at the liability insurance to our district, that will be greatly reduced and be offset for this minor
Did you
cost.
talk to our insurance company to get that?
I'm sorry?
Did you talk to our insurance company regarding that?
Not yet. Why?
Well, I'm just asking.
Should I? I thought we'd bring it up in policy,
No, you
discuss
said
it
you
in
would.
policy.
You said it would, so I'm looking for.
I did, yeah, I talked to insurance companies.
Our
Yes.
insurance company?
Not ours specifically that we currently have,
So you don't know for sure that
Not-
it would, you're just.
not that we currently have. If we have an insurance company that doesn't want to adopt this type of thing, maybe it's time to look at different insurance
No,
companies.
but your quote was that the insurance company
The,
would.
the insurance company typically pays for this process.
And they
Are you
would-
telling me our insurance company does not?
Would go
I don't
down.
know.
Is it within the policy?
I don't know.
Can we get a copy of that policy, Mr. Cleveland?
We probably could.
Thank you. I would like us to have a copy of the policy. Please send the policy committee a copy of our current our current insurance policy, right? Our current drug screen policy, if we have any,
You don't have any.
and the contact names and numbers of all of our insurance companies.
I would recommend we send names and numbers. Yeah.
Why not?
We have board members who contact individuals.
Hold on a second. A board member has every right to contact any individual that we have a contract with.
Right, I just said I don't want to make that recommendation. Unless-
I don't need you to make the recommendation. You're a
Unless-
subordinate in the situation.
Correct.
We're the policy committee. If I tell you, give me a copy of the policy that we have for our insurance, give me the names of the people that are our contacts at that insurance company, and any pertinent drug screening information that's provided within that policy, I'm asking that of you.
Right.
Will you provide that to me?
I will provide the insurance policy, yes, but I would,
Will you not provide me the contact names?
without the majority of the board making that recommendation, no, I will not.
You will not do it?
No.
Okay. Will you give me the drug screen
I
current
don't know that
policy
we
that they
have
have?
any, we don't have any policy.
We have no drug screen policy at all?
No.
For no new hires? For nobody?
No,
We have none?
none. Not any.
What do you do if you suspect someone of drug use?
There's really, there's a process, but it have to.
What's the process?
It'd have to be proven.
How do you prove it without a drug screen?
They would have to be, they'd have to agree to taking something like that.
So it's voluntary.
Well, there is none.
Do you think anyone, there's none, or there is?
I've never came across a situation where it had to be addressed.
It was, so in this hundreds of employees, there's never been a complaint, never been someone's.
There may have been a complaint, but not a complaint that gives me the authority to have someone take a drug test.
I know, you don't have the authority. The board has to give you that authority. And that's how the board works. So I'm asking for the board to create a drug screen policy, which is what we're here to do. So it's my understanding that the cost of this is negligible and will typically be compensated by any insurance company. If we need to negotiate that, I'll be on the committee and I'll be glad to make that happen. So, Rita, I'd like to add that we have a drug screen policy for all of our employees and new hires. It should be
Bring it up at the board meeting.
a yearly test. Now, I'm suggesting we're going to write a policy, right? That's our job, write policy. And then after we write policy, we give it to our board to approve or not approve. And then upon that board review, maybe some information from the superintendent, like you said, if you are beholden to ask the teachers union, you ask them. If you want to ask the solicitor how to write it, you can ask him. I recommend all these people are reviewed prior to creating a new policy. That's why we have multiple readings. But for us here, the policy is simple. I'd like to have the first implementation of a new drug screen policy that entails the yearly screening of all staff members. Simple, easy, done.
Could I just ask one question, since we're all subordinates and under that? Usually I was taught we follow our leaders, and since you're our leader, will this also apply to all board members then too, Mr. Bradley?
I would love it to. I think the board members, I believe all government officials, Mr. Tack, and I'm not the leader, the board is the leader, that group of 5 that meets inside of a room in a publicly announced meeting that allows the Sunshine Act to be applied, that is government. And they're the ones that have this authority, they're the ones that have this right, they're the ones that can implement this by providing the authority to our subordinates, like yourself and Mr. Cleaver, to do a job. And that's their job they're supposed to do. So, yes, I think the board should not only be screened, but I think they should be screened on a biannual basis, not just a 6-month basis, not a yearly basis. Because I think it's more important that our government officials should be tested more frequently.
So part of this is you're recommending that every
Staff member
staff member,
gets tested once a year.
full-time and part-time?
Yes, sir. And prior to hire. So hiring is contingent upon passing a drug screen. And then once a year, just like getting your eyes checked, or I guess people go to the dentist 2-3 times a year, we're going to do a drug screen once a year. If we need to escalate that frequency because of what we find, that's fine. I don't think you're going to find anything, which is why the insurance company loves this. The insurance company then knows their risk. And since they've mitigated that risk, because you have an active drug policy, they greatly reduce our insurance premiums. And that's a significant part of this budget. It's huge. And when we do this in the public sector, it's fantastic. Because not only does it help with insurance premiums, it helps with accident investigations, it helps with slip-fall accidents, it helps with everything. And later, we as a board, if this goes well, might find that when you have an accident, that we add a relevant timeline for a drug screen. So if someone has a car accident or a bus accident or whatever, that they get screened. I believe, and I have to look, that our current subcontractor for busing probably has some sort of screening. They're required to, and therefore, why should not our staff meet the requirements or similar to whatever our bus drivers and CDL people
I'll have to
do?
get back to it. I think in the event there's any type of accident or anything, they have
I think it's
to
mandatory. I believe it's mandatory. I think we should adopt something similar, but right now, I'm asking for a very simple all of our employees prior to hire have to pass a drug screen, and all of our employees that are currently hired have to provide a drug screen, a past drug screen once a year. We can make it a date, or we just say within the calendar year. So they can do it at their annual physical or whatever.
I would agree to have information gathered on this, and I would agree for the board to discuss it. I'm not going to agree to adopt a policy without, A, the third policy member, and without knowing, checking with our attorney, with the teachers, with everything else, to see what this is going to cost. Yeah.
So the
yeah,
process
cost.
is, we write up a policy that we're gonna do it, and then, before it gets approved by the board, we investigate, grab that data, right? Garner the data that you're asking for,
But
that I'm asking
writing
for.
the policy first, how do we write a policy
I just
without
did.
significant data?
I just did. You wrote a policy saying that we need the drug screen. Now, prior to passing that policy,
But there's ambiguity, and.
no ambiguity.
Yes, there
No,
is.
no, we're gonna
Yes,
test
there is.
everybody prior to, hold on, we're gonna test everybody prior to hire. That makes sense, right? You wouldn't wanna hire somebody if they have a.
When?
drug
The
issue.
day before, the day of their interview?
Prior to
What's
hire.
after?
Prior,
Prior to
they
hire.
have-
Isn't that ambiguous?
Not at all.
No.
It's very standard language. Prior to hire, prior to coming here, you have to give us your test saying they can do it at any time, a week, a month, whenever they want to do it. They can't be hired here without having one. It's like a receipt.
Yeah,
So
but
that's-
suppose they
there's
had
no
one 10
ambiguity
years
there.
ago, that works?
Say it again?
They had one 10 years ago, does that work?
No, of course not, Rita.
Okay,
Prior
so
to
then
hire.
what are the details?
But the policy is just a habit, it doesn't have.
Yeah, the
anything-
policy is to say you have to have a,
So what if it's positive?
what's that?
What if it comes back positive?
Correct. The board then can make a decision whether they want to hire the person or not. Correct.
And you don't think there's any legalities with that?
Meaning what, sir?
Meaning that maybe the individual was on a medication that may.
That's why you have the board make the decision, sir.
So now you want the board to know what kind of medication their staff is on, or?
You want to know whether or not they pass a drug screen,
Correct,
sir.
and I'm telling you. if it
What are you
comes
screening
back-
them for?
I don't know, that's what has to be part of the policy.
Excellent. So one of the things you're looking at is that we want to adopt the drug screen policy, and if we both want to adopt it, and it sounds like you want to adopt one, but only if it meets the requirements, now comes the second part of this puzzle of policy committee. Somebody says, I want to adopt the policy. Now you're going to refine that policy in this committee to decide with our helper here, what do we want? So now we got to decide we're going to collect it. And then we're going to delegate the collection of this data to people that we trust, and then we're going to check and verify the data that they got. So if he comes back and says it's going to cost $100,000 to test everybody, and I know that it's $39 to get your drug screen done at St. Luke's or wherever, right? That it's not that big a deal. I know that either something is awry, so we're going to verify what he came up. Where'd you come up with this information? Where'd you, and you're going to look at it. That's our job. So let's understand what the parameters are. We want a drug screen policy for prior to hire and for existing staff members, right? And that's just the screening process. After that, all the other things you're talking about is, hey, how are we going to deal with this? And how are we going to deal with that? And what happens if the person is legally allowed to have this or that, right? We have to decide whether you do it, and whether it's going to be for legal drugs or illegal drugs, right? That's a whole separate entity. The drug screening policy is simple. Have a drug screen once a year. And if you want to use the word current, I like it. Current drug screen within the past 90 days prior to hire.
And I told you I'll be happy to discuss this as the board, with the board.
Well, no, we
When
discuss
I'm
it here, then we
making
take it to the board,
recommendation.
Rita. That's how it works. That's the process. I mean, if you're going to follow your own policies, if you're going to follow your own thing, if you're going to abide by them, we decide what policy
It
we want.
amazes me how when you make a decision, coming out of policy is fine. When a decision comes out of policy that you don't agree with,
Name
then,
one. Name one.
I know.
Name one. Name one law that I'm saying we shouldn't follow. I might want to
That's
change
not
the
what I'm
law.
saying.
I might want to change the
That's what I'm
law, but until then, it's a law we have to abide by. It's the law. We wrote the law. So we're trying to write a new law that says no staff member will be hired without a drug screen, and staff members, up to down, including
Paper's gonna check
the
into-
board, will be drug screened.
I I'm not making a recommendation until Mr. Cleaver checks into some of the things.
And what are we looking for? Let's make sure we delegate to him what he's got to look into. The cost, the savings from our insurance. What else do you want? The date of currency, how long a drug screen should be acceptable by.
I would like to know what other schools have drug policies.
There you go, Mr. Cleaver, we're writing that one down, right, Melissa? Awesome. What else would you like your team of administrators to provide to you so that you can make an accurate decision?
You also asked for copies of our insurance policy.
Copies of our insurance policy and the names of the people. I asked for the names of the people that are associated with our insurance company, right?
That
BSI.
I can agree with.
I can look them up on the internet.
BSI is not our insurance.
Who's our insurance company?
I'd have to look and see the name.
You don't know the
BSI.
name of our insurance company?
For this, it may be our risk assessment.
Yeah, it's the
insurance.
risk people, yeah.
Maybe.
Well, BSI is our broker.
No, BSI, I thought
BSI is
BSI
the broker, yeah.
even for
Okay,
risk.
so we can ask BSI and they'll tell us.
Are they for risk?
They may be the broker, but as far as the person that carries the policy, BSI doesn't carry the policy.
BSI is the broker. So we can call BSI, ask them the broker, and ask them for the contact names. No big deal. We can do that. That's our responsibility as a board. Okay. Anything else we need prior? So the idea is you look at a situation, right? You look at options.
Get it. Move on to your next.
Oh, you look at options. Right? Then you decide what action you want to take. We want to collect more data. And then you come back and reevaluate whether it's a good option. Right? Sewer. It's nice. Okay. I believe that we need a new transparency policy because when I try to get to verify and review the documentation provided by the administration prior to us approving a board bill and an invoice, we've been met with great insubordination and obstruction. So, I want to recommend to the board that we make sure that our administration, that we abdicated our authority to hold the bills and invoices prior to payment, that holds these disbursements prior to our authority to make the disbursement, that we should be able to review them for a reasonable amount of time and not just 1 hour, which I think is unacceptable. So I'd like us to adopt a new transparency policy that says the administration will make all payments and disbursements of public funds available to the board of directors prior to the meeting for at least 4 hours. And I think 4 hours is reasonable.
You're beating your
That's
head
what-
against the wall with this with me because Larry's not here and I'm not sending something out of policy that doesn't have a policy majority.
I understand that, but I'm going to make the recommendation anyway.
All right.
And but I want to have the discussion of what else do you need to make sure that, because right now we don't have that access. How many hours did you have to look at the bills? How long did you get to see them?
I believe it was from, 12 to 1?
There was an hour.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was
now, did you feel that was long enough? Did you show up and look?
No, I did not. I look at the register that comes out, and those bills, most of those bills, I know what they are. Now, if I look at a bill, and it's been approved by the teacher that said they got 10 textbooks, okay? And they sign off that they got 10, how will I know if they got 10? And let me tell you something, if teachers don't get what they ordered, they will let the business manager know. I know that for a fact.
Agreed?
So how do I know, by looking at a bill, if it's signed off by the teacher, by the principal, by the supervisor, how do I know that those 10 books were received and I didn't get 9? How do I know if I shouldn't pay that bill? If I know who those vendors are and what they sell, my looking at that bill tells me nothing. It tells me there's a bill for this. How will I know if that's right or wrong? Those things have been eaten, used, distributed, whatever. How can I verify that that bill is correct?
Let me ask you a more important question.
No, answer me that first.
I will, but let me ask you the first question that leads up to that. Because the more important question is,
Only until like the title definition.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm still waiting for the title definition to be answered.
Yeah.
What title?
Back before, when you said you're gonna explain that, I believe that
Yeah.
was the definition
The
of
title.
Title I.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I said the idea in explaining it is that I'm going to ask my subordinates to teach me and tell me, just like I'd ask a lawyer that I hired or ask them to teach me the law, teach me how this works. And then I would listen to them And then I'd gain other information from other people that are not my direct subordinates to make sure that I get a verifiable information, and then I'd go from there. So if my solicitor tells me that you can't do this, I then go check with maybe someone else. Third-party verification, it's what you're supposed to do. Now, as far as your book analogy, right, I like it, but let me ask you the first question, it's way more important. Why did that person buy 9 books?
And how would I know that? By looking at the bill.
Excellent. And now the next, so someone had to request it and authorize it and then get them, right? And who authorized the disbursement of funds to buy 9 books?
The purchase order goes through. The purchase order is approved
Right.
by someone.
The budget's.
I know, but back up. Who authorized the purchase of those 9 books? Who's the authority, the legal authority to consume and disperse those funds for those books?
So you're telling me that the
I
board,
just asked the question. What do you understand it to be?
what do you mean, what do I understand it to
So
be?
I'm asking a question.
If 9 kids need a book
Right?
and they order 9 books,
Excellent.
the authority comes from the teacher, the principal, the business manager, whoever signed off on all of that?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The authority comes from you as a board member.
So they're supposed to call me if they need 9 books?
No, ma'am. How many years have you been on this board?
Dave, don't get
I'm
condescending.
not condescending. I'm asking a question because I just want to answer.
I've been on as long as you, a little over a
Yes,
year.
excellent. Okay, so I had to learn myself. So I'll tell you what I was taught. It's not condescending, it's just verification. I don't want to go back too far. So I learned from reading the Pennsylvania School Code that the disbursement of funds is only authorized by a board. A majority board in a sunshine compliant meeting, Mr. Tack, right? Sunshine compliant. And then they have the authority to do something. Now, we give the authority to our administration through the process of budgeting. Now, without an accurate budget to make sure that 9 books are on the budget, he has no authority, 0, to do that job. So when we, as a board, allowed our administration to write the budget, that's when you gave him that authority to allow the business manager to spend those funds, create a purchase order, buy the books, receive the books, confirm that they're received, and that they're actual books within our curriculum and were given to students. And that's your job to make sure that the money you decided to put in that budget, when you and I and our 9 people created the budget, that we're going to give these people this amount of money to do this job, and then it's their job to do that job in accordance with the policy, make sure there's a purchase order, make sure there's a recommendation. Someone should double check it to make sure it's within the curriculum, right? You don't want them buying books that are not within the curriculum just because that teacher likes that book, right? You want to make sure that someone has authority to buy that book. They can't go all willy-nilly. This is a government agency. We got to make sure people do it right. There's checks and balances in the system. When you abdicate your authority to write the budget, and you abdicate and rubber stamp everything you're talking about, which is what you just described, you've removed that authority. And these people, the stakeholders that gave you the money for you to be a good steward, is expecting you to do this job. And the fact that you are not, I'm trying to motivate you to do it. Or I'm going to ask for your resignation because it's
Do that
wrong.
all the time.
Because-
That's old news, Dave, and I told you that's not gonna happen, so let's skip that.
Because you need to do your job. I'm educating you to do your job. And if you don't do it, right, they can seek your removal and they have authority over you. We're subordinate to them, public servants. 10 of them can tell you that you're not only do you not know your job, you're not even doing your job, you're
They can
neglecting
tell
your
you the
duty.
same thing.
Say it
They
again?
can tell you the same thing.
Exactly right. That's why I want to make sure that we do our job by not abdicating our authority to these people without having some verification, without having some understanding of what did we abdicate, right? Because right here it says you've given up the authority. You give it to them. You delegated it to someone else. In your policies all over the place. So when you say broken record, yeah, almost every one of our policies shows an abdication of authority without any verification. And I'm trying to correct that. I'm going to fix this government from its immoral actions that you and the other board members take. That's my job. So, I'd like to have a new transparency policy that allows us to review those bills for more than an hour so that we can see them and at least verify they were books within our curriculum, they were paid, they were received, someone signed for them, and that the process within a budget, and a budget line item was none, because they're not allowed to use their light budget to buy books. You know that, right? I mean, so we have to verify that they're not stealing funds from one place to another. And it's very tempting when you're trying to help kids and say, hey, how can I do this? When they really have a responsibility to come back to the board, ask us for more money in a budget or allocation of more funds, and then it's our responsibility to do that. We got to reopen the budget because we made a mistake that we don't have enough for this, and we got to fix it. And that's our job. That's why those people elected you, because you can't have all of those people doing that job, but we have to be transparent enough that they can check that we're doing our job. And that's what I'm here to fix. So I'm asking for a new policy that allows us a 4-hour window, which I think is fair, to review all of the invoices, documentation. And if I see somebody with a rubber stamp on a bill that they didn't actually sign their name to it, I'm going to have a fit. Would you have a fit if someone rubber stamps a bill instead of signing their
I've
name?
never seen somebody rubber stamp a bill.
I understand that, but if you did, would you be
I
upset?
don't know what a rubber stamp.
Yeah, like a rubber stamp, like you buy a stamp with their signature on
What
it.
that is, but I don't know what.
They do that. Would you want someone to do that with our authority? Have their signature made. Would you like Mr. Cleaver to have a signature made that says Jonathan Cleaver that anybody can pick up and go, signed? Or would you want his ink to make sure that it's on the bill? Which one would you rather see?
I told you I've never seen.
I know that, but if you did, what would you do?
What does it matter?
It matters to me.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Dave. A lot of things matter to me, too.
I know.
And they don't happen. People in hell want ice water, too. Nothing matters, you know?
Well, it does. If you're the authority and you want to oversee somebody, do you want to give that person a stamp with their signature on it that anyone can use, or do you want to make sure that they sign something themselves? It's common sense.
I've
What do you
always
think?
had people sign something themselves.
I would
That's
agree.
all I'm gonna say.
Right, and that's for me the right way to go, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you agree that we should remove anyone using a stamp to sign
I
their
didn't
name?
say that. I didn't say
Oh,
that. I
you
said
think
I've
it's-
never seen that.
If I showed you one, would you agree? If I showed you a bill that people were rubber stamping, would you agree?
Okay, who
There may be
represents?
bills that get approved, though, that go through the approval process.
Yeah.
And get a signature on them. I mean, I
They have
can't,
to get a signature on them, right? Everything has to be approved. There's a process.
right.
They have to sign
It
it.
still doesn't mean that something doesn't get generated with signatures,
No,
like electronic
and-
signature.
That's fine.
Once
I'm
it
not-
goes through the process.
Yep, I'm talking about physically verifying it and then stamping it instead of signing it, or
but
putting their
there's-
initial, or
but
putting their
there's
mark.
There may be things that go through that have an electronic signature.
I have no
after
problem with
that.
that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a physical stamp.
But the electronic signature may then, transparent, put a signature on
I have no
something.
problem with that, sir. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person that receives the goods.
I
The person that,
don't know how you would
I understand
tell
that.
the difference, though.
but here's how you do it, watch. So when the person received the books, Rita, you want somebody to ink the receipt of the books. And you and I should be able to verify that it's an ink signature, somebody that we can trust has done it. And if we're concerned about it, you can always call the person and say, hey, Susie, did you sign for 9 of these, right? And then the answer is yes.
I would recommend if it's something with bills that it goes through the finance committee.
It does. But my point is, if someone's receiving goods, they should sign it with an ink signature. Do we agree with that? And that ink signature should not be a physical thing they bought at Staples that says their name on it, that they push a plunger on, and it stamps their name on it, that anybody can use to sign someone else's name. Do we agree with that?
I will agree with that, but that's,
Excellent.
we're not, we need to deal with this because it's bills, probably through finance. And
No.
again, I am
Policy.
not making a policy without
Policy.
Larry knowing what's going on.
Pop, why? Is Larry
Because
any
there's no
more?
We
majority.
could recommend that.
Hold on a
I
second.
disagree
We both
with you.
agreed.
We have no breaking vote.
But you agreed that they shouldn't be using a rubber stamp to stamp off signatures, and you agreed that we need more than an hour,
Yeah, he is, I know.
and you agree that you need more than an hour. Yes, the bills are stamped with a stamp, sir. I've looked at them.
He agrees.
So I'm looking for more than an hour. You're not going to allow the board to have transparency?
Talk to it, tell.
You only will do whatever Larry tells you. You can't make this decision for yourself.
I just said I would recommend it in finance
I'm
because there's a
not-
process of the bills being.
Well, no, this is
I'm
policy.
not-
We want to write a policy about transparency.
I'm not.
I'm trying to write a policy about
You
transparency.
seem to think that the board members have authority of some sort. We don't. It's you against I right now. There is no tiebreaker. There is no
I understand, but
authority.
you're saying the board has
of
authority
policy
against
committee.
what, sir?
Basically, everything we talked about tonight is a moot point.
Why?
Because we don't have a majority
There's two of
to
us.
take it to the board.
We do. Unless you're just going to
But I don't.
object to everything I said,
Well,
regardless of
Yeah,
it's,
I think I'm going to.
which is called an ad hominem
Is
argument.
that the only way it's gonna get you to stop?
But kind of. So the reality is, do you think that we should have more than an hour of transparency for these bills?
I'm not answering these questions
Okay,
anymore.
so I'm making a recommendation. If you're going to abstain from that process, then it just passes through to the board.
I don't think.
As a
that's-
recommendation.
You were saying no.
I'm saying no. I'm saying.
You're saying no then?
Not
Okay,
abstention.
you
not
gave her
abstention.
advice to say no? She's following that advice?
No, he
I was
didn't
making
give
a
me advice.
clarification. because What
Clarification,
you're
appreciate
hearing
it.
is.
So I'd like to make the statement that I want the board individuals to be given at least 4 hours of access time to the invoices prior to the board's approval. Are you on board with that or not on board with that?
I'm not on board.
Not on
with
board
that.
with that.
No, it's
Is
no.
4 hours too many or is not enough?
I told you I want it taken to the whole board. I don't want this done in policy.
But is 4 hours too little or too much? She already gave us an hour. Is 4 hours too much or too little?
I'm not answering.
Not answer, okay. Then the next thing I want to do is, I said that we should not allow our subordinate employees to do anything other than use their signature when receiving goods to ensure that we have an accountable name we can go back to if goods are later to be found that were received or not received, and nobody has that
Can I
signature.
just ask a question though?
Sure.
If you see a bill with that rubber stamp on, don't you still have the ability to call that person and say, did you sign for 9 books?
Yeah, you know what's funny though? You don't have that access because we're not a transparent district yet. But once we are, and as we become transparent, yes, you'll be able to call Kyle
So
Spots.
what's the difference?
And ask him whether he wrote
What's the
this-
difference between an ink signature then and a stamp? If you still have the ability to call that person to see if they actually stamped that.
Yeah, who's the one that stamped it is the question.
Yeah.
So
you
the
can
question
still- well, you
is,
can
Kyle
still call
Spots
and
uses a
ask.
stamp. Who stamps it? When I called, it's not him. Other people have access to his stamp.
But other people.
Not only that, in our
check the
business office,
information.
hold on, in our business office, they want the treasurer to write a stamp. Not only that, they want to get a stamp made for Joy. We don't want our treasurer writing a stamp. We want her signature on stuff. We not only that, they have a stamp for the business manager. Right? Do we or do we not have a stamp for the business?
That's pretty much standard procedure in
It
school.
should not be.
That I know.
For us to protect our district, right? The failures of our treasurer in the past, we should create a policy that prevents this from happening. And one of the easiest policies to create is access to the board to review the bills prior to their approval for at least 4 hours, and open access to those invoices, right? And the documentation that backs them up, like you said, see who ordered it. And then the removal of stamps for the receipt of items. That's all I'm caring about at this point. I want no rubber stamps to receive an item. It should be the person that ordered it or received it or whatever. They should put their ink signature on it, because if they're the one receiving it, we are entrusting them to do it, and you want to be able to go back to your superintendent and say, hey, it says Susie signed for it or Johnny signed for it. Can you confirm that this actually took place because we found out or a parent said something, or we just want to verify? And then he has the process to follow, the documentation, the paperwork, the purchase order, the receipt, the bill, the payment. And we can check that on anything, at any time, to make sure that we're not losing finances. And that the contracts are right, and that the information is there. So that's what I'm asking for. If you're going to obstruct that, that's fine. Your decision, your problem. I get it. Now, the next one was, we have a policy, which is law by local government, and we're the administrator of this local government, we're the adjudicative authority, right? We adjudicate, we're the judge as the board for this law. And we have a situation where the board as a whole, 9 of them, told you in the finance committee, Andy in the finance committee, and Richard in the finance committee, and the business manager at the time, and the business office at the time,
Go through this TD Bank thing.
to go to TD Bank, right. So we gave them the authority to do something, we gave them direct orders, and they do not have the authority, nor do you, as an individual or anyone else, the authority to not do what the government told you to do. So, I'm asking you here in policy, how are we going to create a policy to ensure that the common sense understanding of a government agency dictating upon their subordinate superintendent to do a job, that he has a responsibility to do it, and the insubordination of the finance committee members and yourself and Andy Yenser, who received emails from the bank saying, you were authorized to do this, we need to do this, and they took action to block that government action, is illegal, right, and neglectful of your duty. So therefore, I'm looking for your apology and resignation, but I'm also looking for, prior to that, would be to create a policy to ensure that when a government action was approved, that our administration does it. Because other than that would be considered chaos. And we're losing money. It's costing the taxpayers money. Don't shake your head, you're losing money. You have an insubordinate administration that our board has a responsibility to administer to, and it's happened more than once.
And
So we
this
need
is
to
the
create a
world
policy.
according to Dave Bradley. This is not the world according to what actually happened.
Oh, what do you think happened?
I'm not going there with you, Dave, but I don't buy your
You don't
whole
think the board,
explanation of this.
so my statements are the board authorized 9
I'm
to
not
0.
going into this with you.
They gave a timeline, a process, and the authority, and it did not occur.
And all, that timeline all include things that Mr. Fike was supposed to do and he didn't.
I don't care who does it. We have an accountability, we have a responsibility to make sure he does it.
Okay, why didn't you all the times you were in his office?
We are trying to, that's my point. Somebody inside the administration physically said, do not do that until the new person shows up. And they overextended their authority. That's why I want to make sure we have a policy to protect our superintendent, right, from not taking authority that he doesn't have because of ambiguity.
Thank you for being so worried about my protection.
You're welcome. I mean, we should, because whoever sits in your seat should have that protection by our board, right? Because whoever we hire to do a job should do the job. And if they fail to do the job, right, we should look at one of two things. Did they fail because they didn't know? Did they fail because they didn't know how, right? Was it ignorance? Was it incompetence? Or was it insubordination? And once we as a policy committee, once we as a board decide what the law is on how to handle ignorance, right?
Incompetence
Incompetence.
and
And
insubordination.
there you go, perfect. So you
If
learn.
can't remember your bullet points, I'll remember them for you.
Thank you, and you learn. So we transferred the
Oh, yes,
agent.
God, I learn every time you.
Now once we have that learned, I appreciate it. Be my puppet if you want. I don't care. I'm glad you settled. So now if you look at this process, we as a board has a responsibility. They are insubordinate. It's their employees. It's their job to do it. The fact that they did not, and the fact that we did not hold them accountable, we neglected our duty, and you are correct. That neglected duty cost those stakeholders, the people we're supposed to be held accountable, hundreds of thousands of dollars, according to the minutes of the Finance Committee that documented those savings.
They weren't documented.
They were documented.
No, they weren't.
They're in the minutes. You should read your own minutes.
There was no documentation about.
One more time, the minutes document
There
this.
is no documentation, Dave.
There's a document called the board,
Discussion. There is no physical documentation.
TD Bank
That
did
gives
not
any
outline how they
documentation.
were going to save us that money.
but they told you they were.
There is no.
They just told us they would. How many times has somebody told you they were gonna do something and didn't?
Actually, we're talking about that right now. We're talking about telling the board to do something, the board told them to do something, and they didn't do it. So what do? You verify it, right? So we told our administration to do something back in November. They have an obligation to do it, The documentation that I'm referring to is the only thing that the government gave me, which is the minutes to the meeting, which I have to take as verified. Somebody signed that document verifying the information on it. The secretary of the finance department, right, signed the minutes that said those numbers. So I have to take those as trust. If you'd like to verify them extra, that's fine. But the board voted on it, 9-0, and now they're trying to get the administration to do a job. The administration doesn't do the job. We got to hold them accountable. Whether it was ignorance, which he claimed at one point, incompetence, which we discovered at a second point, or insubordination, which we found evidence of on a third point. So now we got to find out which one of these three things caused this not to happen, and we got to write a policy to make sure that we don't have a failure to obey government orders. Because, for instance, we have a government order, you and I, from a government above us, that we have to follow the Sunshine Act. And if we don't do it, and we find that we didn't, we should apologize and fix it. Larry claimed immunity and cost the district tens of thousands of dollars.
That's your opinion.
He did, he never did.
He never did what? He never claimed immunity? Twice. We have the documentation. So the question is, we want to hold him accountable. So I'd like to make a policy that says, any individual inside of this district that does not follow a direct order of the government shall be reprimanded by the board, the adjudicative authority. To stop at the board, but I just want to make sure we clarify that it's the adjudicative authority of these policies. There are policies to hold. They're not some that you follow and some that you don't. Right? It's the majority of the board wrote a policy. If they want to change a policy, they come to this meeting and they talk to us, and then we can make recommendations and collect data. Is there any information you'd want to have prior to making that a policy? Is there anything we're missing?
You just said they should come here and give us information.
I just did.
Nobody's here. No, only you
I
did.
That's all it takes. Only takes one. And it doesn't even,
It's him.
I don't even need, yeah, it's me. I don't even need 10,000 people to tell me that the sky's not going to fall, to know that it's not going to fall. I just need one that says, here's how gravity works, and the sky's not going to fall today. I don't need a consensus of individuals to make a moral decision.
No, you never do.
Correct. You don't need a consensus. You need a morality and a standard to go by. So my standard that I'm looking for the policy, the law,
What do you think
Is
of the
morality.
vote? No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No what?
No, I don't agree with you with your policy. Take it
Okay,
in
what-
front of the board.
Thank you. So what was my request?
I don't know.
You don't even know what I just asked
No.
for? Melissa, can you at least read it so that she can then make her no statement? In fairness,
Just want me to read it?
please.
Make a policy that says any individual inside this district that does not follow a direct order of the government should be reprimanded by the board.
You say no to
And I'm
that?
saying no policy isn't going to bring that to the board. You bring it to the board. Policy committee
But
is
do you
not.
agree with that idea or not?
I voted no on policy taking it to the board.
Okay.
You take it to the board.
Last one, we have illegal use of school funds. So the Pennsylvania school code says you're only allowed to use these funds for these purposes. You can tax people and collect them. You can then set up a budget on how you want to use them. You can then authorize your administration under each line item of the budget and how they're supposed to use them. And if they use them other than in accordance with the code, they would be deemed illegal use. And it's our responsibility as a board to prevent such illegal use. So I'd like to make a policy that says any instance of illegal use of school funds that is found by any individual within the district is brought to the board for evaluation. And proper adjudication and review. So we're just making it open that anybody that finds that we did something wrong can bring it to us.
I know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cleaver, out loud,
Policies,
sir.
they're just statements that are kind of open and
They're not open, they're very non-ambiguous. It's a statement. If somebody brings this to our government agency, we have the ability to review it as a board and adjudicate that responsibility.
What's the process and what's the form they have to?
It's all already outlined in the Pennsylvania School Code and our school policy. There's an adjudicative authority. The board is the adjudicative authority. This is school law.
To report this, I'm asking.
What's that now?
What's the process of reporting it? What are
Just
the
tell us.
what are the guidelines?
Just tell us.
What's the form they have to fill out?
Nothing. Just tell us. I don't care if it's an email.
So somebody can come to you and say, Dave, so-and-so spent money illegally.
Correct. And then we investigate and find out whether it's good or bad. They come to the board and say, you know, I saw our school van with 9 people rolling out of it last Thursday night. Is that legal use of school funds or illegal use of school funds? The only way to find out is, Mr. Cleaver, we have a complaint, we have a process, someone wrote an email, someone did something, someone told you, you were at a picnic and someone said, hey, what's with the person using why were the lights on? Why was this happening? Why was that happening? And as soon as you hear about it, your morality would be that you want to correct it or check it.
We tell you that kind of stuff.
If I hear it.
Yeah, but we have it now. We're going to have a policy and a process that actually allows it to occur. Because what happens is when someone brings it to your attention, you now have this adjudicative authority and respect of the office, I hope, and your oath of office to actually look at it with fidelity, which now puts a burden on you to make sure that it takes place. You just don't shush it off. If you look at Scranton, if you look at Penn Hills, if you look at Susquehanna, if you look at Harrisburg, if you look at Erie, if I can go on and on, those boards did not take that responsibility, and therefore we should adopt a policy that makes us have that responsibility so we can adjudicate it and give those people the opportunity, because they're the hearts and minds of this community and this district. So that if Mr. Tack says, I want to take a trip to Florida, right? And I got the company credit card, and he runs off to Florida, then comes back and says, that was a great trip, before that happens, or after that happens, or when someone finds out that he's on Facebook on the beach, someone says, wait a second, is this good or bad? And then it's our job to look at it. Right? And then we do. If they're doing first class airfare, maybe we want to look at it. Was it really cheaper or not?
Does Tim have a company credit card?
No, I don't think anyone does. It's an example. It's
Goofy will pay for me.
Pardon?
Goofy will pay for me.
Goofy does?
Goofy does.
That's good. Well, you get the idea. I mean, the idea is that there's a process and there's checks and balances. I'm trying to get you to look past the PSBA and recognize that these things are missing from accountability. This board has abdicated its authority too much. This board has rubber stamped things and let other people rubber stamp them down the hill. It doesn't hold itself accountable. We need to. And the policy, the law that we adjudicate, he enforces, is part of the puzzle. He meaning Superintendent Cleaver. So we authorize it. So when you look at it from another analogy, we're the person that writes the law. We're Congress, right? And then you got this administrative branch. He's the president, right? He goes and does the job. He hires ICE. He hires resource officers. He does what we tell him to do. And he does a good job of it, right? And if he doesn't do what we told him to do, we have control over him. We're Congress. But then also in this situation, very unique, we're also the adjudicative authority. So we're the executive branch, we are the legislative branch, and we're the judicial branch. So you actually are judge, jury, and executioner as a volunteer board member. That's why we're so upset when you abdicate all this authority and rubber stamp everything. Because the only people that have authority over you is the stakeholders. And when you give up your elected authority to everyone else, you're not doing the job you're elected to do. That's why we ask for your resignation. That's why we ask for your apology. Because not only do you not know that you're supposed to do this, but you're not doing it even after someone educates you. And I don't care if Hitler tells you to not kick a dog. Somewhere in your heart, right? Somewhere, prior to being hung by your thumbs, you should say, maybe he's right, kicking a dog is bad, even though Hitler told me not to do it. And then you have this non-ad hominem argument to say, what is right, what is moral, what is immoral. And when you learn that, This man will be held accountable, you will be held accountable, and the stakeholders will have a government of, by, and for the people again. It's been broken, we're fixing it. I really wish Larry would have been here, that's why I kind of waited for the meeting, but if he's already told he's not making it, I understand that. So, last one is, apparently this district has some missing money, right? And it's damaged this board's reputation to the public and our educational fund balance. I think that we should write a policy to ensure that the board can keep an eye on the administration, the business office. I think the transparency I requested before was it. Since you didn't like that, I'm going to just make the statement that the board take on the responsibility of managing the funds, the 9, themselves without abdicating that responsibility to the administration. So we have a full check and a balance. That you don't just give them, let them write the budget, and you don't let them raise it by 10%, and then ask you to raise the taxes, and you say, okay, you actually have to do your job. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I think we should adopt a policy that requires our board to act with fidelity. Just as written in Pennsylvania School Code, but on a local level.
What do you think I'm gonna say?
I'm open-minded to listen to any opportunity. Maybe in the last 15 minutes, you grew a conscience, decided to be moral, looked in the mirror, had a heart, something. I'm hoping.
Nah.
No?
No,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Thank you. I move we adjourn.
Are you sure?
Have a nice day.
7:28.
We done? Anybody else have anything else?
Anything else?
Mr. Tim.
All right, I think the meeting's over. Anyone want to not let the meeting be over? Anything else going to happen before I leave?
Thank you.
Are you guys leaving, or I'll sit here and wait? Make sure there's nothing happens outside the meeting, because I'd hate to see non-transparency applied to our Sunshine Act Policy Committee meeting.
Meeting adjourned, I can't see that.
If you leave, I'm the only board member here, what could happen? I can't vote, there's no majority, there's no anything. What could possibly happen? You think you can have meetings all by yourself, but I know better. If you leave, there's no way I can do anything. So what difference does it make if I talk to him about something else? I can't do anything here.
The meeting is adjourned. Oh, is that what that is? Well, Mr. Lieber? Yes. Okay, hold on, please.
Thank you, Melissa.
Sure. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna just adjourn the policy meeting.